Hey, this is Blondeguygamer and welcome to Black Sheep Game Reviews. So after discovering that I was reviewing Earthworm Jim 3D, I said I played worse games, and that is still true. But this game... if I were to summarize my experience in just one word, or even just one syllable, it'd be... But before I elaborate on why that is, let's talk about Earthworm Jim and how this came to be. Earthworm Jim was created by Shiny Entertainment in 1994 for the Sega Genesis and other platforms the following year, in which you played Earthworm turned intergalactic superhero thanks to a power suit. It's best known for its surrealist comedic tone as well as being a fun and wacky side-scrolling action platformer. It became a hit that spawned a sequel in 1996 on various systems and a cartoon show the year before that lasted 2 seasons. However, unlike the dumb toy exploitation that was the Double Dragon cartoon, the Earthworm Jim TV show is actually pretty good and quite funny. I'd even go as far as say that it's the best adapted video game cartoon I've seen in my opinion, as the show goes for a comedic tone similar to something like Animaniacs, while retaining a lot of what made the first 2 games so memorable. Shortly after Earthworm Jim 2, development started for the next game, but there were some setbacks. The creators of Earthworm Jim, artist Doug TenNapel and game designer David Perry, would have little to no involvement with this game, since Doug was working on the cult classic game The Neverhood and its sequel, while David worked on MDK and Wild 9. There was also the fact that Interplay had bought Shiny Entertainment, who are now busy working on the aforementioned games David were on. But Interplay was still keen on keeping the Earthworm Jim franchise going, so the game would be developed by VIS Entertainment. Those of you that see my Evil Dead A Fistful of Boomstick review may remember that VAS also made that game. But keep in mind that Fistful of Boomstick was one of their later games they made, and Earthworm Jim 3D was their second game. Plus, Fistful of Boomstick was only decent in my opinion, so my expectations were not that high. But even with that and how the game holds up in this series, it's not that good. So without further ado, let's start up Earthworm Jim 3D. Released on the N64 and PC in 1999 after a lengthy development period, Earthworm Jim 3D is the first and only 3D game in the series. There were also plans for a PlayStation version, but much like the PlayStation 2 version of Command & Conquer Renegade, it was cancelled. And while the game was initially published by Interplay, the North American N64 version was published by Rockstar, oddly enough. Stupid visual gags. Anyway, the story is that after getting a cow fallen on Jim, he's been reduced to a coma-like state and has to fight within his own mind as a super eagle to bring himself back and stop his enemies from trying to take it over. Oh please, if I wanted a 3D action platformer that delved into people's minds, I'll stick with Psychonauts, thank you very much. This is all told by Peter Puppy in a Zordon tube at the start, who also explains with awkward exposition that he's your best friend. Reason being that in the cartoon, Peter was actually Jim's sidekick, but still turned into a purple monster and beat the shit out of Jim now and then, just like in the games. In fact, 3D is based more around the cartoon version of Earthworm Jim, but isn't nearly as bad as Double Dragon 5, believe me. Zordon Puppy tells Jim that in order to save himself, he'll need to collect golden udders in order to get into and reclaim his 4 brains, which was also established in the cartoon.
I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm itchy. Where are the girls? Okay.
Peter then gives a golden udder to get into the first brain. Collecting gold MacGuffins to progress in later areas of the game. Yeah, Earthworm Jim 3D uses the same formula from other N64 platformers like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, and while I did grow up and enjoy games like that, Earthworm Jim 3D isn't as fun as those, but we'll get into why later. Once Peter tells you everything you need to know, he doesn't say anything else until you collect all the udders and beat the game. Oh yeah, thanks for all the support, Peter. Why bother beating the game at all if all you're going to do is explain what we need to do and then be completely useless the rest of the game? I know Peter can't do anything directly since the game is in Jim's mind and all, but it just feels like a waste of a character.
Hi Blondie, it's me, your friend and fellow reviewer, Zero Master.
Okay, thanks for telling those that may not know who you are. What are you doing here, Zero?
I thought I'd show up and tell you gotta review Earthworm Jim 3D. Because the game is in your mind.
No, it isn't.
Oh.
So, is that all you came here for?
For now, but I'll have something for you when you finish the review.
Gee, thanks for this contribution to the review, Zero. Is this all you're gonna do?
Oh yeah, while I'm here, I should promote my YouTube channel, my reviews on River City Gamers, my Let's Plays, my Twitter, my Facebook, River City Gamers page, River City Gamers Facebook.
There we go. Nothing against Zero or anything, but he's gonna be a while promoting himself, so let's just continue on. Another supporting character that's only a bit more useful is Snot, a living booger that helped Jim in Earthworm Jim 2 and was in the cartoon too. He provides tutorials and hints throughout the game, effectively reducing him to signposts in Super Mario 64. As for how the game plays, it's a pretty standard 3D platformer with Jim's basic abilities intact, though there are a few quirks with the controls. For example, because the whip is assigned to down C, up C is used to toggle camera zooms, and in order to go into first person view, you need to hold R then up C. Another mechanic is ducking with the B button. Jumping while ducking does a high jump, except it's not nearly as cool as Mario's backflip, and ducking can avoid enemy projectiles. In fact, as long as you're ducking, even in wide open areas, enemies that shoot you can't hit you with their shots. Add the fact that you can also duck in first person when aiming with certain weapons, and you have something along the line of Time Crisis. If it wasn't on rails. And didn't need actual cover. And if the enemies weren't that smart. Which is not surprising considering they tend to bug out now and then anyway. One final thing you can do while ducking is move to do an evasive roll. While meant to dodge attacks, I found myself constantly rolling at times since it's slightly faster than Jim's jogging. The game does attempt to mix up the combat a bit with the different weapons you can obtain. It's like collecting the different guns in Earthworm Jim 2, except in this game you can only carry one new gun at a time, usually from vending machines. The problem with this though is that weapons with limited ammo can't be refilled until you use up all of it, and that you only get one weapon to pick up per level, or even world, say for one level that has two. Hell, one level just starts out with a different gun you can only use during it, making the weapon selection not very flexible and restrictive. With the actual platforming, it's doable, but has issues. Main one being that the camera will most likely be your greatest threat in the game. Despite being able to pan the camera around, change the zoom, and have it fall behind Jim with the R button, it'll constantly get hung up on things and obstruct your view. Not only that, but with the exception of a few fixed camera angle areas, you'll need to constantly wrestle with the camera to get it facing the general direction you want, and even then it can make it difficult to gauge distances when making jumps, especially on narrow platforms. But despite these flaws, it is still possible to get through all four brain worlds, which are memory, happiness, fear, and fantasy. Each brain also has the character called the Sacred Cow of Contemplation, who explains which villain is trying to take over each brain. In order to get to new levels and fight the brain's boss, you need to collect marbles, because Jim's literally lost them, to increase his IQ level. It's pretty much exactly like collecting notes and opening doors in Banjo-Kazooie, and there are 100 marbles to collect in each level, like in Banjo-Kazooie. And if you die or leave the level, the game only keeps track of the highest number you collected until you break it, like in Banjo-Kazooie. Then there's the title screen that shows various demos of various levels, like in Banjo-Kazooie. Okay, I think you all get it by now. The marbles actually do slightly heal Jim, giving you a bit more of incentive to collect if you took damage. And you may have to, since marbles only heal 1% of health apiece, and atoms dropped by defeated enemies and destroyed boxes that thankfully come to you on their own heal 5%. Which means there's no way to fully restore your health if it's low due to level hazards and enemy attacks that can take away considerable amounts of health. It's fairly easy to die because of this, making collecting marbles all over again a chore. As for the levels themselves, there are about 2 each in 3 of the worlds, with 4 in one of them, which isn't a whole lot. The worlds consist of a barnyard war zone, a food-themed world with aliens, an overplayed haunted house area complete with a graveyard disco, because disco is dead, ha ha ha, and a Wild West area with old lady enemies, because there were old ladies in Earthworm Jim 2, I guess? While most of these places are fairly unconventional, it's not nearly as diverse or out there as the levels in the previous 2 games. Not to mention being relatively small, which means you won't get lost easily, but there isn't a whole lot to it in most of these places. For lack of a better description, they're just there. I mean, think about it. The previous game had you rescuing puppies with a giant marshmallow, flying over a mucus lake, being attacked by killer filing cabinets, and this. I know that's hard to top, but was this all VIS could come up with? Even the overworld feels drab, as it's just a small room with the Zordon tube going down to the same 4 rooms going into 2 areas and a boss door. At least Peach's castle and Grunty's lair were interesting to explore. Here it just feels a bit lazy and uninspired with the creative potential of being Engine's brain they had at their disposal. Then again, I think they were trying to replicate the humor from the cartoon and referencing the old games more than being creative, but the tone is all over the damn place. One level has you rescue a crow colonel's underpants, then the next has you go into a cow base and decapitating cows with a meat cleaver.
What's this game rated again? E? Okay, stuff like this in video games normally don't bother me, especially since, like most gamers, I'm pretty desensitized with violence in video games, especially when I play games like this. But here it just feels out of place, you know? Yeah, whatever. Let's just play the joke and move on.
Decapitation!
I understand trying to make the game funny like the previous Earthworm Jim games and the TV show, but more often than not, it falls flat on its own punchlines and puns. A lot of it can be summed up with, "Hey, there's a cow drill sergeant named Mussolini!"
That's the joke.
Then there's stuff like cows' heads being chopped off and other suggestive jokes. Granted, in the TV show it got away with quite a bit, this bit being one of my favorite and most unexpected.
Mom, do you ever feel not so fresh?
Yes, they really did reference that commercial. And the girl on that was voiced by Kate Susie, who was Phil and Lil in Rugrats. Just thought I'd leave that mental image for everyone.
However, most of the suggestive jokes in the game just comes across as immature rather than clever, and only a few self-referencing jokes got a chuckle out of me. It's not nearly as funny as something like Rareware's sense of humor in games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, even if that one is much more mature and doesn't hold back.
Now this is what I call a platform game.
And when the game isn't making lame jokes, it's trying to replicate the humor and other aspects from previous Earthworm Jim games with little to no effect. Such as in the first level, you launch 5 fridges from missile silos. Because the first game had a fridge launch a cow, and I guess since its fridge is being launched now, that's funny? Not really. Oh, and the fridges just land on random characters you meet in each world. You see, and this is a spoiler for the first Earthworm Jim in case you never played it, but it's nearly 20 years old, so don't get mad at me if I ruin the surprise. Princess What's-Her-Name gets crushed by a cow you launch at the beginning of the game, making it a funny payoff at the end. In Earthworm Jim 3D, however, it's on characters you don't really care about and have little significance throughout the game, and only falls on them just for the sake of fridges falling on random characters, which isn't a funny payoff. But I would gladly have the mediocre platforming and humor instead of the boss fights in this game.
Ugh, the boss fights. They're the one thing I dislike the most in this game and almost killed the entire game for me. There's only 2 words that bring this much dread for these fights. Pork boarding.
Pork boarding!
For these fights, you need to collect 100 blue marbles while surfing on a pig. But the thing is, the boss collects the marbles too, and you need to pick up home missiles and shoot them to drop their marbles and collect them. However, they'll be constantly on your ass with missiles that'll make you drop marbles and lose health. You can avoid missiles by jumping, but your timing needs to be precise and it's easy to get blindsided. Add the fact that controlling the pig and picking up missiles and marbles is sloppy, and you have one of the most tedious boss fights I've ever played. And you do this for every single boss fight. Imagine if every boss in Super Mario 64 were just 100 coin collections while riding a Koopa shell instead of actually fighting them. It would get old really fast. Yeah, and it's not like the older Earthworm Jims, the first one in particular, had a bunch of different boss fights or anything. I guess the V in VIS doesn't stand for variety. Because of this, the bosses hardly differentiate themselves and only have a unique ability each to annoy or drag out the fights even further. Also, you only fight Psychro, an alien chef named Fatty Roswell, who's the only unique villain out of the 4 main ones and wants Jim's brain to unlock the secret of the ultimate burger. No, really. Professor Monkey for a head, and Bob the Killer Goldfish. Well, there is the final boss too, but it's not Queen Pulsating, Bloating, Festering, Sweaty, Stinky, Pus-Filled, Malformed Slug for a butt. Phew, try saying that 5 times fast. I'll save who the final boss is for later, but it should be noted that Princess What's-Her-Name and Evil the Cat aren't in this game either. Despite the fact the latter was shown in promotional and box art images and being on giant records in one level, Evil was cut out of the game.
A minor setback.
Lack of variety also hurts the levels, as most udders are simple to obtain without much thought put into it, or are pretty vague. Well, the game does try at least, but the tasks for collecting some udders are repeated or just feel mundane. Like when you have an Elvis character in one of the food alien levels, because Elvis and aliens, whom you have to escort and whip over Gauss, making it a copy of the For Pete's Sake stage in the first game, only with less going for it. Or how about in the second burner level you shoot security cameras scattered around to get an udder even though they don't do anything, nor are you told to do so. Luckily, GoldenEye on the N64 taught me to shoot security cameras anyway, and that chair is going to explode with gunfire. Then there's having to lightly press the analog stick to sneak past rabbits and holes who lay TNT if you so much as walk or jump that usually starts a chain reaction that does massive damage. But the most maddening is having to herd old ladies into a corral with some of the most frustrating pathfinding and detection I've seen, which the constant noise they make only makes it worse.
Fuck it, stop it, don't go that way, go! And stop it, you... No! Get in there! Get in there!
Oh, and you have to do this twice, with the second time being even harder. Yeah, let's move on before I snap. The look of the game is, well, it certainly looks like a VIS game. Everything is appropriately cartoony, but on the low end of technical power for the N64, as most things and enemies are blocky and have choppy animations. But I will still give credit for having a decent draw distance and frame rate, even if the latter dips down occasionally. The graphics are certainly dated, even when compared to other N64 games, but I wouldn't say it's unappealing. It's just that, again, it's focusing on being more like the cartoon show instead of the style that previous games had, which makes it look somewhat plain in comparison. I should mention that the PC version does have cleaner and smoother graphics since it runs at a higher resolution than the N64, even if the latter version could have benefited with the RAM expansion pack by the time it came out, or even the Rumble pack for that matter. But that's not the only difference between the two versions, as the PC version has more music tracks than the N64 one, which were most likely removed due to cartridge limitations. Just to list a couple examples, here's the Brain Overworld in the N64 version. And here's the PC. In the first level of the game, the same music track is used throughout the world on the N64. But on the PC, this section has, well...
Yeah, okay, is this Earthworm Jim or Duke Nukem all of a sudden? A little too much, don't you think?
Not to disrespect the composer, Ged Grimes, since he does have a fairly interesting history. He was a founding member of the Scottish pop band Denny Wilson, whose work includes the 1987 hit song Mary's Prayer, which is probably best known for being in the movie There's Something About Mary in more recent years. After that band broke up in 1991, Grimes focused on his solo career of writing, producing, and creating music for multiple media, which included video game music obviously, though not much outside of Earthworm Jim 3D is really worth mentioning. Since then, he's now the bass player for Simple Minds, aka the guy that made the Don't You Forget About Me song, and is endorsed by Sandberg Guitars and Mark Bass, so he's still doing pretty good for himself. As talented as a musician Ged Grimes seems to be, I still can't help but criticize the music in Earthworm Jim 3D since it's pretty average sounding. It also doesn't help that the N64 version cut a lot of the tracks out, and even then, a few of the PC tracks seem a little overzealous for something like Earthworm Jim. This might be a stretch, but it sort of seems like Ged Grimes did the music for this just because he was in the neighborhood or something for VIS, since that studio was Scottish too. And now it's time for a skit with a Canadian and an American doing badly acted Scottish accents.
Don't you forget about me. Hello? Hi, is this Ged Grimes? Hey, what is it? This is Game Studio VAS Entertainment calling. Who? Oh, come off it. Surely you've heard of us. We made the computer game Heads. Right. Anyway, we're working on a new Earthworm Jim game, and wondering if you would like to do the music for it. Ah, damn it. Alright. Great! We'll see you there! Take that, Tommy Tallarico!
This has been a skit with a Canadian and an American doing badly acted Scottish accents. I apologize if you, the viewers, didn't think this was funny or were offended. Though knowing me, I'm more likely to anger people if I mispronounce a name or something instead. But I digress. We now return to the review of Earthworm Jim 3D. So yeah, the music's still alright, but again, and I know I keep going back to the older Earthworm Jim games, but this is the third game in the series and it's inevitable to make comparisons, it's not as distinct or memorable as Mark Miller's or Tommy Tallarico's scores in the first two games. Though to be fair, a few tracks in 3D I actually did like for what they are. For the rest of the sounds, they're, sounds, so not much to comment on except maybe the voice work, what little there is anyway. Dialogue is told in text boxes, but Jim will still yelp out in pain and say something every so often, usually when entering levels or picking up a weapon.
Cheesy effects! The Tex-Mex the time forgot! Hey, bad dudes! Come here for a second.
I should mention that Jim is actually voiced by Dan Castellaneta, who is best known for voicing Homer Simpson. He was also Jim in the cartoon, which is no surprise considering 3D is based off of that. The in-game dialogue does try to replicate Jim's over-the-top heroic tone from the show, but the lack of voice acting sorta diminishes it. It also doesn't help that every few marbles you collect, Jim will yelp out what I think is BRAIN! Making it a little annoying. Most of the other voice clips are from the bosses, which just say a line before and after the fights or when they get hit. Wow, violence, suggestive jokes, and mild language. Rated E for everyone! Let's see, is there anything else I can talk about? Oh yeah, the game doesn't keep track of time, but how many steps you take in each level because... there's also the smell option you can turn on in the option which does... I don't know, maybe the game was so ahead of its time that this was added before smell-o-vision was invented. Let's just go to the final boss and end this before I resort to jokes like in the game. So who is the final villain Jim needs to face in order to reclaim his mind? Why, it's the one thing that all straight men fear. Their feminine side! Yes, you literally have to fight Jim's feminine side, who is just Jim in a pink suit and a blonde wig and is aptly named Earthworm Kim for control of the body. And naturally it's a pork boarding game because VAS couldn't be damned to think of anything else for a final boss in a 3D platformer! This fight is by far the most tedious because if you so much as graze Kim, you'll switch bodies and Kim will throw your marbles you collected until you touch her again. Ew, I just realized what I just said. So after a half-an-hour battle of marble madness, and not the good kind, Earthworm Kim is defeated and the floating head of Peter Puppy, now out of its tube, tells Jim he can get his body back. But then the final fridge he saw coming a billion miles away crushes Jim with the end magnet letters on it. But don't worry, Jim does come back, only to get crushed by a cow again out of nowhere because it needed to fill the cow crushing quota like every any of the cartoon episodes, and we get the credits with a bad spiral effect attempting to be 3D.
Yep, that sure wasn't very satisfying. Or rewarding. But you do get one reward for collecting all 1,000 marbles and finishing the game. You get to play as Earthworm Kim! Who takes double damage and marbles don't heal you. And even though I did collect all 1,000 marbles and finish the game, I didn't find an option to play as her. Yeah, I'm never playing this game again.
As much as I wanted to enjoy this game, it just didn't do much for me. There was a lot of potential for a 3D Earthworm Jim game, but this ended up an average at best Banjo-Kazooie clone and doesn't hold up with the other two Earthworm Jim games or other 3D platformers. And keep in mind that by the time this game came out, 3D debuts of Sonic, Rayman, Donkey Kong, and the second N64 Castlevania game came out around that time, pretty much dooming it from the start. The fact that it came out 3 years after the show is heavily based on didn't help either. While it's not the worst 3D transition of a game series, it's still fairly weak. I might have forgiven this game a bit more if it was an older N64 title, much like the previous versions of the game that was shown in Nintendo Power and the like, but the lackluster levels, combat, and platforming make this game that I can't really care much for. This is also a pretty weak way for Earthworm Jim to go, as this and the Game Boy game Menace to the Galaxy that came out shortly after, which was also pretty would essentially kill off Earthworm Jim for quite a while. Even Doug Tenapple said in interviews that 3D ruined what made Earthworm Jim funny in the first place. Ouch. Yeah, when the original creator basically said this game ruined Earthworm Jim, it leaves a mark. Later on, there were plans to make a PSP game with some of the original people who worked on Earthworm Jim involved, including the creators and Tommy Tallarico, but was cancelled in 2007 due to financial issues. But in 2010, Gameloft made an HD version of the first Earthworm Jim for the Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network. This version has redrawn graphics and even a multiplayer mode with a set of cooperative levels. So because of this, Earthworm Jim is not completely left out of the dust, though it's hard to say if we'll ever get another full-fledged Earthworm Jim game, with or without the creators. Regardless, Earthworm Jim 3D is a game that most fans of Earthworm Jim or 3D platformers won't miss a whole lot if they pass on it. It's not really recommended unless you're willing to tolerate the hackney design choices and gameplay.
Finally glad to be done and over with this game. Now let's check up on Zero and see if he's done promoting himself yet.
And then finally, there's a channel just for Nico. Nico the kitty. Wait.
Oh hey, good timing Zero, I just finished the review.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh. So what'd you think?
It wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, and I had the bar set pretty low.
I see. Yeah, I don't think it's that bad.
Did you even get to the first boss fight yet?
No, but I like it so far.
Ah, well, just wait till you get to a boss fight. Your opinion might change a little like mine did.
Yeah, whatever.
Is that all you're going to say in my review, Zero?
Actually, there's one more thing. Remember when SCR gave us both State of Emergency at Kineticon? Well, I was thinking we could do a collab on it.
Oh, right, State of Emergency. Collab review. I'll think about it. Talk to you later, Zero. Thanks for showing up. Bye!
Hey, wait a minute!
And on that note, let us end the review with Peter Puppy, and how he felt after being almost completely useless in the game.
I am Peter. Sad and unhappy am I without Jim. Boo-hoo! Boo-hoo! My life is without purpose. Emptiness wells up in my tortured soul. I'm going to... I am Snot. I also am empty. I'm just the sugar, but I'm gonna barf too, and the jelly barf. Behold the gooey slop of our sorrow. It is Slopper Damerum, the twilight of the condiments. Weep for them, weep for their sorrow.
I can relate. Well, except maybe the jelly barf part. That's a little messy. Gah, just playing this makes me want to play Banjo-Kazooie again. Or any WarioWare game for that matter. Of course.
Earthworm Jim!
The soil he did crawl.
Earthworm Jim!
A super suit did fall. Jim was just a dirt-eating, chewy length of worm flesh, but all that came to a crashing end.
Earthworm Jim!
He's such a groovy guy.
Earthworm Jim!
He rockets through the sky, cruising through the universe, having lots of fun. Here comes Earthworm Jim, you know that he's a mighty one. Look out! Despite his great big muscles and his really big ray gun, Jim is still an earthworm, but then he's the only one with a super suit to make him really super strong. Jim can be a winner if we only sing along.
Earthworm Jim!
We think he's mighty fine.
Earthworm Jim!
A hero for all time.
Earthworm